Well, as Jane said, I'm Anne Marie Cox. I'm the Director of Communications for the Diocese.
Norm Borman, Director of Property Management for the Diocese.
And as you may know, the Diocese is asking each parish to create a communication plan in the event of a crisis or disaster. This would be included in the functional annex portion of the plan because the process would remain the same no matter what the emergency is. The goal of the plan is it's designed to provide guidance regarding when and who to contact at the Diocese of Des Moines in case of crisis. The plan is designed to provide guidance to thoughtfully and quickly communicate with stakeholders during an emergency. First of all, in the case of an emergency, contact your local police or fire department if the situation warrants immediate help. Contact the key emergency response person for the parish also. When providing space in the church for an event, be sure the event organizer knows who to contact in case of an emergency. The emergency contact name and number should be available in a designated place. So if you have a group there for religious education, make sure whoever's in charge knows who to contact in case of an emergency. If you have a prayer service in the church in an evening or in a weekend, make sure whoever is organizing it and is in charge knows who to contact in the case of an emergency. The Diocese of Des Moines should be contacted for the following events or for any event that's identified in the parish emergency preparedness plan. Now let me run through a few of these. For instance, loss of life, if there are significant injuries, a major property damage to the church or the parish school, significant property damages to homes in the community, a technology loss, damage to sacramental records, serious illness that might require canceling masses, significant theft or vandalism, or any issue that will likely garner media attention. In the case of emergencies, feel free to contact me. Again, I'm Anne Marie Cox. I'm with the Communications Office, and my cell number is on your screen there, 333-8387. If for some reason you can't reach me, please leave a message and then contact Norm. He may be able to help you, and his cell number is there on your screen as well. These cell numbers are on 24/7. Again, if you can't reach us, please leave a voicemail message. Norm and I will contact the appropriate person at the diocese to help you. Let us know in that message or when you reach us if you need immediate help or if you're just alerting us to a situation and you don't need additional help right at that time. Norm, why don't you take it away?
In the event of a disaster, there are clear roles and responsibilities for leadership at both the parish and the diocesan level. The diocese can be an advocate for parishes and schools by working with LMC and Catholic Mutual Insurance when needed, by crafting a message and assisting with communication during an emergency, by notifying the appropriate ministry or department for additional assistance and or support services, and by connecting the parish and school with the local county emergency manager. You might not be as familiar with that, but sometimes depending on the size of the emergency and how big an area is affected, there can be federal dollars that would be available through FEMA, but we have to give that information to the local emergency manager so they can turn it in. And you're wondering, well, how much help can we really be from a distance? Because we might be almost 100 miles away. But I think there are things we can do with regard to making phone calls and contacting people and helping organize things. And then we will obviously get there when we can, but it might be a few hours before we're there to help in person. But there's some things we can do from the diocese before that. Catholic Charities also can connect parishes or schools that need local assistance, resources, and volunteers through to the Red Cross, United Way, county emergency management agencies and so forth. We will take the responsibility to involve Catholic Charities whenever it's appropriate and whenever we think they can be of help. So you don't need to make another call there. We will do that.
As you create your parish plan, think about your basics: who, what, where, when, and how. What audiences or stakeholders need to know about that emergency? Who do you want to communicate with? The key leadership, maybe neighbors of your property, or do you need to send a message out to everyone? Think about what you want to communicate. What are the key facts? What's going to happen as a result? For instance, is Mass going to be moved to another church or time, or is the school or religious education program canceled or postponed? Think about what that message is going to be. You might want to add a pastoral note, ask for prayers for those who are suffering as a result of the emergency, and for the emergency responders who are coming forward to help. You might want to offer a prayer and reassure parishioners and stakeholders. When do you want to send this out? Do you need to send it out immediately? Does it need to go out within a few hours or within a day or so? These are all things that you'll want to consider. You'll also want to think about how you're going to deliver that to your key stakeholders. For instance, do you have the cell phone numbers for all of your top leadership? Do you have email addresses easily accessible? Are you going to use the media to get a message out? And do you have the contact information for them? Or perhaps you have a texting service where you can send one message out and it hits all of your people when you send it out. Think about what might happen if your computer system is down. How are you going to get that message out? The diocese has the ability to tap into your ParishSoft database for your parish. We can pull the email addresses and get a message on your behalf out to parishioners for you. Something you might want to think about depending on what your timing is and what message you want to convey.
When you're thinking about how to execute the plan, think about assembling a team ahead of time. Consider coordinating a team to address several issues. The following are some. For example, pastoral care. Pastoral care is the primary and foundational concern. Whoever is responsible for pastoral care will visit with the families of those who have died or were injured or suffered due to the emergency. And very likely, your pastor will be the person who will be doing that. So the next person you need is an assessor. Now, this may be the pastor if he's not busy, but it could also be a deacon, a business manager, somebody who's carefully chosen that can assess the damage of what has happened. He can update the pastor and the spokesperson and begin making calls to the diocese and insurance representatives. Damages from an emergency could include property damage, injury, loss of art. There's no end to the number of things, even questions as to whether or not a building is safe to be in. And so you need somebody who's able to do this with some degree of confidence and also know when to tell people to stay away. And then the next person is a spokesperson, Ann.
Right. As you create this team on your parish, you're going to want a spokesperson because you're going to be getting a lot of calls from a lot of different people, a lot of contact. You are welcome to refer media calls to me here at the diocese, and my number and email address are on your screen. You might also want to designate a local spokesperson who can respond in preparation for emergencies. Now, this spokesperson could be a priest or a deacon. What's important to remember is that you only want to have one spokesperson at a time. They should be the person providing public information during an event to make sure that the message is clear and consistent, because they'll probably be communicating over a period of time. This person should also only be communicating what he or she knows and shouldn't speculate about what happened or how many are injured. Law enforcement can handle that. Medical emergency people can handle some of that. If you didn't see it, don't have firsthand knowledge, there are certain key phrases that you can use to help you through that. For instance, you can say, at the moment, my primary concern is for the safety and health and the condition of our parishioners. We'll be happy to get back to you on that when we can. Or a simple, well, here's what we know right now. You can acknowledge a question by saying, that's a good question. Perhaps the police chief, the fire chief, or the mayor can help you answer that. You can throw the question to another emergency responder. It's better to say something than no comment, but again, you don't want to guess at the answer or speculate. It's okay to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that right now, but what I do know is we're a strong, faithful community, and we're going to get through this together. The spokesperson should have a few key statements ready that they can communicate. For instance, just some background information on how old the building is, how long the parish has been around. We know the building is a treasure, but we also know that God's people make up the church. You could use a statement like, well, we mourn the loss of our church building. We're thankful that no one was injured. Or it's a tragedy that violence came into our church. We ask the community to keep those who were injured in prayer, and we also ask that the perpetrators also be kept in our prayers. Again, who we are. We're pastoral people, and we want to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Some details that should be included in your parish emergency response plans. One would be contact information for all the key staff, parishioners, and volunteers. Now, we all know how dependent we have become on cell phones and our phone list that's in those cell phones. But we also know that many times in an emergency, cell phone service can go down. So you might find yourself sitting at a landline in an office or at a house and unable to use your cell phone for this. So I would suggest it doesn't hurt to have paper backups. Good old paper sometimes is a lot faster than any other way to find phone numbers in a hurry, especially if your cell phone isn't working. Have some methods to back up important records and store copies off-site. Now, I know this is talked about in a previous webinar, and for the most part, everything that's located in ParishSoft is backed up to the cloud, so that's pretty safe. But if you keep other information on your computer desktop or any other information that you have, paper information that you might have in your offices, if you think it's really important to be able to access that, think of some way to have duplicates off-site. Another thing to keep in mind is to establish a clear transfer of authority and responsibility for essential functions to others. So if the pastor has become injured or ill, or for some reason could not fill his responsibilities, be ready to contact the bishop's office for further responsibility. If the pastor is unavailable for a period of time due to illness or vacation, he's just out of town, there should be someone delegated to handle events that may arise in his absence. Are there specific responsibilities that someone else can take on? Establish a backup plan for worship. We know how important this is. We have a parish right now that is dealing with flooding for over a month and has had services in a couple different locations, and will also have Easter services in a different location. So we never know when this is going to happen, and if you have a plan, it's much easier to put it in place in a hurry. Know your vulnerable parishioners. If you have disabled, homebound, or physically frail parishioners, you obviously will want to check on them to make sure they are okay, know how to reach them, and develop a plan to communicate important information to parishioners quickly, such as through email, phone, or text, because parishioners will want to know what's happening, how the church is, how the parish is, when they'll be able to get back in.
Again, your key contacts for us at the diocese, myself, and my number and email address are on your screen. Norm Borman, his number and email address are on your screen. Feel free to contact us anytime, day or night, weekend, weekday, and and we'll make sure that you get the help that you need.
Yes, we will.
When they said
Jane?
24/7, they meant 24/7.
That's right.
If you're thinking about questions, I'll give you just a minute to type those into the chat feature or the question feature. That's up to you which one you prefer to use. If you're watching this in a recording, I'm leaving those contact numbers up and the email address up. You can always send those questions in to Ann or Norm, depending on when you talk to. I have a couple of questions I was thinking about while you were talking, and a couple of reminders for those of you who are watching this webinar live or in a recording. All this contact information, that goes in the base plan, the basic plan. If you remember, I know it's been about 8 months, 9 months since we talked about that basic plan. Remember, way back at the beginning, we collected information. We collected phone numbers. We collected details on who was in charge and how the transfer of authority worked in any emergency. All of that is in the basic plan at the very beginning of your plan, and that's why this stuff was important. This is why we did all this up front. So when you start putting the emergency contact information for communications, add that to the front of your basic plan, because no matter what the emergency, if you need support from the diocese on communications, you're going to call Ann, and that would go up front so that it applied to any type of emergency that you had. Also, Norm mentioned have a clear transfer of authority. That goes also in that front end basic plan section under incident management, where you set the diagrams and you talk about how your incidents are managed. So it doesn't matter what the emergency is, those things are always done the same way. A couple of questions I had on the spokesperson. Boy, some people don't like to get in front of a camera or anything even remotely like what you're doing today. What if I just can't do it? If I have a small parish and nobody will volunteer to be the spokesperson, is that a service that you all could provide? Or
Absolutely. Just give me a call and let me know. Depending on what the circumstances are, you might need some help, maybe drafting a statement that would go out, that would cover the important information with a pastoral message. You might need a face to answer reporters' questions. That would help too. I could help there. Whatever you need to help communicate efficiently and clearly, I'd be happy to help with.
So if I'm afraid I'm going to sound silly because I won't come up with what to say, you can just give me a prepared statement to read on camera?
I can. But when you say you're afraid you're going to sound silly, remember, if we stick to the core of who we are, that's important. We don't have to speculate on how something happened or who is injured, but we know we're church, we know it's the people, we know we're a faith community, and we stick together. Those things you should be able to talk to pretty clearly.
Okay, great. And then on the team, we talked a little bit about the assessor. Norm, is this position, this assessor position, something that I can delegate out to multiple people, or are you looking for just one person to be an assessor? Can you give me a little more of an example of?
You probably could do multiple people, but I think provided you have somebody who's capable, it's probably better to have everything coming back to one person. And sometimes it's difficult in a parish because we're so used to the pastor making the decisions. It's kind of hard to step up and start doing that. But if the pastor is busy with pastoral duties, someone has to be able to step up and make some decisions and direct some people to do certain things. And if you can find somebody that has some experience with that, or has experience with buildings, so they are able to assess damage, I think that's always helpful. The main thing is to think about it ahead of time so that it's not a surprise to somebody. So somebody is ready to do that and knows that in the event of an emergency, they need to be there. They need to be prepared to do it and expect to do it. And I think that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. So here are some things we can do on our prevention side, because we're always trying to build prevention into our plans. We can pre-designate who our assessor will be and some of the items maybe on the list that we want them to look at. We can pre-designate who our lucky or unlucky spokesperson is, depending on how comfortable you are with that. I could probably even maybe draft some messages ahead of time, because we know there are some questions that the press is most likely going to ask. I mean, there are some of that is pretty simple to sort of guess what they might do. So if I can sit down and you gave us some samples, draft up those messages ahead of time, and put them in an annex to your plan, or wherever you keep your plan, you might want to think about. I know some of my colleagues have a stack of cards, 3x5 cards, and they pull those cards out when they know they're going to go hit the press, and they just flip through them to remind themselves, these are the most common questions that I'm going to get, and these are the answers that I have to those questions. So I think those are important things that we could do on the front end of this to kind of get ahead of it. And then I encourage you, the template will be available shortly, to go out and take a look at the template and the document that's been provided. That will give you some additional resources and ideas on what to put in that communication plan as well. But I do want to emphasize, I think communication is really, really critical, extremely critical in emergency response. And sometimes it's the difference between whether you have a good, successful, confident response, or whether things really start to fall apart on you. Don't let the message get away from you.
Right.
I think that's really critical in emergency operations, and that's why we have public information people that's all they do is communications in disasters. So with that, I think that's the end of the questions that we've got this afternoon, but I sure appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise and information. And again, if you're listening to this webinar, the phone numbers and contact information for both Ann and Norm are on your screen. Please reach out and realize that the diocese is here to help you with these plans during this project and for the months and years beyond. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for taking the time to be here. We will see you again next month.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.